This is a scribe that was owned by my grandfather.
Really?
Who learned how to build houses when he was in 4th grade in New Bedford.
From who did he learn from?
Some guy who was building houses, some Portuguese guy. And he dropped out of school and he built houses for the rest of his life.
Oh, he dropped out of 4th grade, do you think? 5th grade? Mm-hmm. Wow. So you're very proud of him. And how long did he live?
He died in his 60s of a brain tumor. You can see it says Manuel Thomas. That's my grandfather's name.
Manuel's a cool name.
Manuel Thomas. And it's the reason why my first name is Thomas.
Oh, okay. You're named after him.
Because it's my mother's father.
Your mother's father.
So the surname disappears, right? So that's why it's my first name.
Oh, yeah. And what's your middle name?
John.
John. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. This is good. And when you were, is it rolling? It should be. Yeah, good. And when you were at the thing, at KI, Knesset Israel, it was a memorial about the couple who was killed at the Jewish Museum. Mm-hmm. You were talking to a guy afterwards about, and he also knew that area in Italy that you had all these relatives with the last name of something.
So my wife's last name is Taranto, Taranto.
Yeah.
And her family comes from the Aeolian Islands, which are these volcano tops sticking out of the Mediterranean north of Sicily, these 7 little islands. The island that her family's from is called Filicudi. There's about 200 houses there. And for many, many hundreds of years, there's one priest on the island, everybody else has to be a fisherman. Right?
Oh, yeah.
That's all there is to do.
Yeah.
And so the chief export has been people.
Oh, right.
And so people have emigrated from this little island to 3 places on the planet consistently over many hundreds of years.
Should I guess?
You won't. You're welcome to try.
Okay.
Fremantle, Australia.
Okay.
Buenos Aires, Argentina.
Ooh.
And Waltham, Massachusetts.
Waltham. Oh, I think I heard you say that.
If you go to Waltham and you pull out the phone book, there's pages and pages and pages of the same surname.
Which is?
Toronto. There's 4 or 5 other last names also.
Yeah.
And it turns out they really are all related to each other going back to the island. And because my wife is very interested in genealogy, she sort of did all the hard work. She discovered that one of her ancestors was like the 6th Mormon. Right?
Not there.
No, in the U.S.,
yeah.
Whatever it was, 150 years ago or something, right, in New York or somewhere along the way. And for the Mormons, genealogy is very important.
Yeah.
And so once you can find a Mormon in your genealogy tree, the whole thing fills out. Because they know all of his descendants.
Right.
So if you can work your way back.
And that's what she did.
And so now, whenever she runs across a person with the same surname, she'll say, okay, who are your 2 grandfathers?
Oh, wow.
And she'll pull out her phone, we're 5th cousins, twice removed, right? Whatever the thing is. And every single time it works.
Well, where does she run into those? Mostly in the Boston area?
Yeah, just, work or at some event.
Yeah.
Happen to run across somebody with one of the 5 or 6 different surnames. Yeah, they're all related. Way back.
And you can do it, too, as the husband.
I could, but I just assume get to know people about it and talk about other things.
Right. Well, one of the things you talked about that I'll ask briefly is about that blue pen that you talked about, and I had never seen that pen. Why don't you explain that?
So, it's the English language sometimes is elegant and sometimes it is not.
Yeah.
Assignment is not. It is an anti-Semitism pin.
Oh, right.
Which my math brain makes it a pro-Semitism pin, but that doesn't make any sense either. So, anti-Semitism has been ebbing and flowing for thousands of years.
Right. Yes.
Thousands of years. Right now, it's flowing. It's not ebbing. It's increasing.
Yeah.
And the FBI tracks these things.
Yeah.
And the incidences of anti-Semitism, above and beyond saying something obnoxious to somebody on the subway, are dramatically on the rise.
Yeah.
And we saw it recently in Boulder, Colorado.
Yes.
At the Run for Their Lives protest, which is focused on releasing hostages.
Yeah.
That's the protest. We want these hostages to be released, these people who were abducted to just be released.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we saw it, sadly,
in D.C.
just recently in Washington, D.C.,
Yeah.
where two people, one, a German who has become an Israeli citizen, the other, and is a Christian.
I know.
He's
I
not
read
Jewish.
That. I know.
And the other, an American Jew,
Yeah.
were murdered outside of
A museum.
outside of a Jewish museum, coming from an ADL event,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And it's pretty open and shut.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You mean why he did it?
Well,
Yeah, of
that
course.
it was an anti-Semitic attack.
Oh, yeah. And also Colorado is pretty.
Colorado was as
yeah.
well,
Yeah.
right? And so I think it's really important that we had a Me Too movement where we talked about openly how women suffered
Yeah.
from sexual discrimination and, frankly, from assault and other misconduct.
Yeah.
And it was over and over and over again. And somehow it never bubbled up to the surface until that movement on Twitter.
Yeah.
And then it was important that we said that Black Lives Matter.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean other lives don't matter.
Right.
This is not like white lives matter too.
Right.
No, Black lives matter. And we
Yeah.
can say that and everyone can understand that that doesn't mean that other things don't also matter. But
Right.
this is the focus right now
Yes.
because this is the moment. And we said, stop Asian hate.
Oh, yeah. I remember that.
Because we had this sort of pushback during COVID as if it was, some arbitrary person on the street's fault that COVID happened,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Well, this is in that vein.
Yeah.
This doesn't mean that there aren't other forms of bigotry that need to be addressed. Of course there are, and they matter too.
Yes.
But at this moment, for me as the representative from Brookline,
Yeah.
it's anti-Semitism, stupid.
Yeah.
That's the one. And if you're the victim of some other form of discrimination, I want to help you too. I want
Right.
to defend you, right? It's not the only one. But
Of
when we
course.
talk about movements and we talk about moments, this is the moment where that matters in my community. And that's why I have no qualms about saying it out loud, just like I said Asian Lives Matter,
Right.
or
Black
Stop
Lives-
Asian Hate,
Right.
just like I said Black Lives Matter, just like I said,
Me Too.
we need to amplify the Me Too movement.
Right.
I don't think that is in any way inconsistent. In fact, I think it's perfectly consistent.
Yeah. And you said, that was pretty powerful, you said, people might ask you about the pin, and you say, well, or why are you wearing the pin? And said, why should I not? Or why do other people not? Something like that.
Yeah, I've been a rep for a little more than 6 years,
Yeah.
and every rep gets a little button.
Yeah.
And I joke that it's the button that lets me get into the building without going through the metal detectors. It's a button that state reps get. State senators get a slightly different button, same
Yeah.
idea. And I wear it, and I wear it with pride. My predecessor, Frank Smizik, wore it every day.
Yeah.
I'm proud
Yeah.
to represent Brookline. I'm proud of the work that I get to do on
Yeah.
behalf of so many people.
Yeah.
And so I've worn that button every day. And I'm in a suit every day. So I really do, I wear it every day, right?
And the blue one?
And
No,
this-
I meant the blue suit.
not necessarily this suit, right?
Yeah.
It's always a suit. And so for me to wear any other button, it took me a while
Yeah.
to kind of allow myself that decision point. I had made a decision. It was a good decision. I wanted to keep it. And what I noticed I was doing was I was wearing this button in this building much more often than I was wearing it in the district.
Right, right.
I'm not sure why exactly. When I was speaking at KI, I kind of, you notice I didn't have any notes. I just got up there and
yeah.
said, what was in my heart.
Oh, yeah. Which is great, I have to
And,
say.
Well,
Yeah.
sometimes it comes out better than others, right? There's a reason people prepare most of the time. And I sort of made that realization as I was speaking. And so I said one way to phrase it is why are you wearing that blue button at the State House? But a different question is, well, why aren't you wearing it more in the district?
Yeah.
And so I said I would, and I have been wearing it more in the district. I don't wear it every day.
Yeah.
But I do make it a point to wear it both in places where I know many people will know what it means and
Yeah.
feel supported.
Yeah.
Feel like, hey, there's a guy who's not Jewish
Yeah.
who sees us.
Yeah.
Because not enough
I know.
Gentiles are seeing this for what it is.
That's what I was about to ask you.
But I also wear it in places where nobody knows what it is, precisely because those are the people who are going to ask about it, and it gives me the opportunity to talk about it a little bit without being overbearing, without beating people over the head. You know, you got to move people along a little bit at a time most of the time, and I hope that I'm able to, you know, both let people who are legitimately afraid of anti-Semitism feel a little more reassurance that they've got friends in places they don't necessarily know, and I hope that bystanders will sort of understand that this is real, and this is scary, and this is painful, and even though it doesn't affect you directly, you should still know about it so you're armed and equipped and ready to be on the right side of any conflict rather than take 3 steps back and pretend like you didn't see it.
Yeah, is that... So I've been thinking about that too, of course, that it seemed to me that the Jewish community hasn't done a good job in building bridges, or that the Christian communities, and that's kind of a vague term, because in Massachusetts it's all about ethnic communities, but not really, you know, haven't come forward much. And why have people not talked about that? If you have a sense about that.
You know, it's hard for me to speak for either side on this one. I think that, you know, we talked about the Me Too movement, Black Lives Matter, Stop Asian Hate. In all 3 cases, in the vast majority of instances, everyone can instantly determine if you're in that group or you're not.
Oh, right.
Now, there are certainly some Jews who wear it and wear it proudly. But there are many Jews who have a different way of moving through the world. And whether or not that's because they are fearful or ashamed, or if it's just because that's not how they choose to express their identity, either way. Right? People who are closer to Jewish communities are better at identifying Jewish people even though they don't say it out loud. Right? I'm not that good. I'm better than most of my Gentile friends at it. Right? I bet you that person's Jewish, right? Sometimes you can tell. Right? Lots of different signals, subtle signs. Right? Sometimes they're not so subtle, but you just have to know what to look for. In any case, it's different because I think over different times, certainly in the last 100 years, but I'm sure going back thousands, there's frankly a Jewish tradition of sometimes standing out and sometimes deliberately not standing out. And so I think there's a much broader sense of ideas of both Jewish identity and how to express it in their own community, both Jewish community and more broadly. So that's very different. You can't, most people can't hide those other things. And not that they should want to, but it's not even an option. So I don't know exactly.
Because I would think that especially the mainstream and liberal Christian, Protestant, Catholic, whatever, would be really not focused, but would really be sensitized to it and kind of enlightened about it, especially because it seems like everybody below the age of our age, I'm not sure what I'm older than you, but had gotten at least some Holocaust education in public schools, is what I've heard about from people in their 40s, 30s, 20s, and so forth, and teens. And that's certainly a wake-up call. So I would think that the Christian churches...
Maybe, but look, I grew up, I had my public schooling mostly in the 1980s. I knew about the Holocaust. I also knew about the KKK. I didn't know, personally, anybody who had survived the Holocaust or anybody who had any involvement on either side of the KKK. Right? So the same argument can be made, like, how could there be racism against people of color? We all know about the KKK. Well, there still is. Right? And I guess that's I don't mean to justify it. But the fact of the matter is, like, we have historical record, and people have seen photographs and movies and heard testimonials. And yet there's still a bunch of bigots running around. Right? I don't think we should be surprised about that. I do, and I don't think it's, there's this sort of kumbaya if we just taught people to love each other, right? Maybe, but this is a thousands-year-old problem.
But there was a thing about the famous poem of Niemöller,
Sure.
Niemöller, you know, about standing up and not waiting till it gets worse.
That's right.
And stuff. Yeah.
And so I think that you know, the blue button, the blue pin is one of these ways, one of these sort of small tools to help remind people just to lean in a little bit more on moving us all toward doing right by each other.
Yeah.
And if we can bend the curve a little bit, and then the next person comes along, bends it a little bit more, before you know it, that arc of justice is going further in the right direction.
I like the way you put that. Yeah. Also, I like the way you opened it up and said, "I'm not part of your tribe," but I couldn't remember what the second line was.
So what I said was, I'm not a member of the tribe.
Yeah.
I'm a friend of the family.
Oh, that was it.
I said, and this is not my house of worship. I'm a welcome guest.
Good. That was great.
And I thought it was really important to clearly communicate that I can't empathize. I can only sympathize.
Okay.
Right? All sides of my family, all four of my grandparents are Catholic, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's
right.
I'm raised in the Catholic tradition. My children are being raised in the Catholic tradition. My wife is Catholic.
Yeah.
That's who we are.
Yes.
And so I've spent plenty of time in synagogues, sometimes for weddings and bar and bat mitzvahs, and sometimes, you know, in recognition of some terrible things that have happened in our community or elsewhere.
Yeah.
But I didn't want anyone to think I was claiming ownership of grief or grievance that doesn't actually belong to me. Not in a direct sense.
Yeah.
Right? I wanted to be clear, but also that that I do feel welcome.
Oh, yeah. Well, I saw that totally.
So
I mean, you knew half the people in the audience.
I did. And, you know, when I said I'm a welcome guest, I happened to look down at Rabbi Hamilton, and he had a really nice smile.
Did he? Yeah.
Right? I think he was proud of that moment, because that's the community he wants.
Yeah.
And I believe that's how he wants people to feel.
Yeah.
And I always have felt very welcome at KI.
You know, just one last question on this term. I'm going to switch over to soulfulness in a moment, because it's called chutzpah and soul. The Catholic Church has made a lot of strides on these issues. I'm sure you know about that, right?
Yeah, 2 steps forward, 1 step back.
Yeah. I mean, about recognizing Jews in a positive way. Yeah, so where do you think it stands now, if you had an opinion about that? And the new Pope. And the new Pope.
I would say, in terms of parishioners, right, most places in the world, in America and in the world, don't have a lot of Jews.
I
So they're not thinking about Jews very much at all.
Yeah.
Right? It's just sort of out of sight, out of mind.
Yeah.
I do think that I am more comfortable with the way the Catholic Church sort of understands Israel than the way some mainline Protestant churches, particularly Southern, think about Israel.
Oh, they want to convert. You mean that?
Well, when you start hearing the words "the Holy Land" an awful lot, that feels like this weird, not quite colonialism, but like, we don't care about the people who live there. We care about, we care about it for our own interests.
Yeah.
And that makes me a little nervous.
Yeah. That's a good way of putting it.
Yeah. Yeah. We're not visiting Israel to meet Israelis. We're visiting Israel to check the place out,
Right.
That makes me a little nervous.
Yeah.
I don't get that sense with Catholics at all.
Yeah. I wouldn't see that.
So I have noticed, the words change depending on context, but sometimes, you'll hear like the phrase Judeo-Christian.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
When whoever's speaking wants these two to be of the same. Sometimes you'll even hear, Abrahamic, right? So we want to include Muslims in this particular.
Yeah.
It's always been a little weird to me.
Yeah.
Like this sort of picking and choosing.
I agree.
When these sets of people who what they have in common is they're all people. But outside of that, you know,
a lot of
conflict. As if like there are other religions that don't, essentially live with the Ten Commandments in their own way, who don't essentially understand morals in almost exactly the same way we do.
Well, and the concept of God, or the concept of a higher being, too. Pretty much, almost all, religions. Is that what you mean? Like, what is...
But there's both the connection to a god or gods, but there's also the understanding the right way people should interact with people.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Right? There are not a whole lot of religions who are sort of excited about, frankly, Old Testament.
Yeah.
You know, we've kind of passed it a little bit.
Yeah.
You know, an eye for an eye, maybe that's probably not the best way.
Right.
And there's just a stronger and stronger expectation of treating each other well. And that's pretty consistent in religions.
Yeah.
And that's pretty consistent amongst the understanding, the morals of people who are not religious.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, religion doesn't have a monopoly on moral behavior.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, well, the concept of secular humanism, the concept of existentialism, which I happen to like. But, you know, that's another thing. If people think that Jews are only a religion, and there's so many of us that identify in other ways.
Right.
Yeah.
This is a thing that I think is hard for people who are not close with Jewish community members to understand. In practice, most people just, keep the religion of one of their parents.
Yeah.
Right? I didn't decide. I wasn't like 13 and reading through all the religion. I said, "Oh, Catholic, that's the right one."
Yeah.
Right?
You were brought up
it's
that
the
way.
tradition I was raised.
Yeah.
And I think for many people, maybe they're a little less enthusiastic about that religion than their parents. Right? Sort of the intensity declines over time for many people, and that's true, I think, for lots of religions.
Definitely.
But to be Jewish, there's a reason we say member of the tribe.
Yeah.
Right? It is some combination of, a genealogy, a genetic path,
like a peoplehood. Yeah.
That is reflected in religion, but not entirely or exclusively in religion. And for people who aren't Jewish, this is sort of hard to understand. Right? I don't think of myself as Catholic in my culture. I think of myself as Italian and Irish and Portuguese.
Oh, I didn't know about
all
the other
of which
ones.
seem to have similar Catholic-related European cultures in them.
Yes,
right? For sure. To be Jewish is often both your religion, but also it's this whole other part of who you are.
Yes.
And it gets complicated when people think of, oh, well, the Star of David is on the flag of Israel, therefore it's Israeli. No, it's not.
Yeah.
Sometimes it is, and sometimes it's not, and that's really hard for people.
You mean sometimes it's specifically
sometimes Jewish people are Israeli.
Yeah.
Sometimes they're not. Sometimes Israeli people are Jewish. Sometimes they're not.
Yeah.
Like that sorts of nuance, is hard for people to have unless they really seek it out.
Yeah.
And we don't have time in life to figure out all the nuance of everything.
Right.
And it seems to me just about everything related to Judaism, to Jews,
has nuance. Yeah.
It's got thousands of years of nuance.
We're complicated people.
That's right. And so I think that's really hard for people who
don't know much
grown up at least
it.
adjacent to the tradition.
That's an interesting, I've heard that term. Moving on to soulfulness.
Yeah.
So how would you define it, and how does it play out for you right here at the Massachusetts State House? But start with, your life growing up. I saw you went to the Kent School.
I did.
That's a really high-level school, right?
Mm-hmm.
In Western Connecticut.
Mm-hmm.
I think I've seen it's a beautiful place, right?
Yeah.
Pretty waspy?
Yeah.
Tell me about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I was a funny kid. I grew up in the town of Brookfield, Connecticut.
Okay.
Next to Newtown, Connecticut,
Okay.
which
Oh,
is,
is that
which
where-
is famous because
for
of the
the-
school shooting.
That's right.
I now live in Brookline, next to Newton, and it took me about 10 years to be able to say that without stumbling
right.
at least once.
Yeah.
And
And people in Brookfield were very tied. I mean, they really felt it too.
oh
I mean,
yeah.
You were, yeah.
Yeah. There were kids who I went to grammar school with
Yeah.
who had children at Sandy Hook on the day of the shooting. To
Mm-hmm.
my knowledge, no one who I knew
Was killed.
lost a child, but I just can't even imagine the terror.
Yeah.
But growing up, Brookfield it's essentially too far from Manhattan to be a place with a lot of wealth.
Okay.
It's hard to work in the city and
Okay.
live that far away.
What would they do? Take trains?
So literally Danbury, Connecticut is the farthest train stop away from Manhattan,
Okay.
right? So you could drive to Danbury, park, get on the train, and it would be like over a 2-hour commute each way.
Oh God.
It's really difficult.
Yeah.
So Danbury is very much like what we in Massachusetts call a gateway city.
Yeah.
It's sort
okay.
of post-industrialist. Danbury, Connecticut
It was a hat capital. or
used to
something.
manufacture hats.
Right.
And in fact, the hats they manufactured were suede.
I don't like
The way you
those.
do suede is with mercury, which meant the overwhelming number of factory workers became mentally ill.
Oh, it's not
And that's-
cancer. It's not cancer.
No, it's illness. It's mental illness, and that's where the phrase "Mad Hatters,"
Really?
as you hear in Alice in Wonderland, comes from. It's because hatters went mentally ill from handling the mercury.
All right. I mean,
Yeah, so
yeah.
Danbury is this sort of, post-industrial, struggling
Yeah.
municipality, and Brookfield is this little tiny suburb of it.
Right.
And growing up, I, like all the other boys, played sports 3 seasons.
Yeah.
Everybody played sports. And,
which one did you like the best?
I went to a Little League game last night, and I think probably baseball.
Me too.
Yeah.
I like the way it looks.
I like the way there's time to think and strategize throughout the
between.
entire game.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And I like that part of it. But I also was a math nerd.
Yeah.
high
So
school.
that. Yeah. Engineering. You
And
can't. Right.
so, when I was in 2nd grade, I was in the 3rd grade math class.
Cool.
And in the summer between 7th and 8th grade, over the span of 3 weeks, I learned Algebra 1, high school, first year algebra,
Between 3rd and.
between 7th and 8th grades.
Oh, okay.
So in 8th grade, my mother took me to the public school office or something, and she said, my son needs to take geometry. Well, 8th grade doesn't teach
Yeah.
geometry.
It's more like 10th, I think, right?
9th or 10th or
10th,
whatever.
yeah.
And the school said, well, that's ridiculous. He hasn't taken algebra.
Yeah.
And she said, but he knows algebra. So they said, well, prove it. And they handed me the final exam.
Really.
On the
Right there
spot.
in the
On the
office.
spot. And, 40 minutes later, whatever it was, I got an A on the exam. They said, fine, he knows algebra. So I took the high school bus in the morning, first period, to geometry class in 8th grade.
Okay.
And then they would take a little van for me to go back to middle school for my other classes. And it was fine.
Yeah.
It was a perfectly reasonable geometry class. I think I kind of had the kids who were never going to be mathematicians in my class, right?
Yeah.
It was a regular geometry class. It wasn't. It wasn't future rocket scientists.
So you were more elevated than. you were higher
Yeah. I
than-
mean,
yeah.
it was, and I just sort of understood that I would want more academically from a high school than my local public school could offer.
Oh.
I just kind of understood that.
Yeah.
So I went home and I said to my parents, I want to go to boarding school because I want to go to a better school. And you have to understand the tuition for 1 year
At Kent.
at a school like Kent was more than my parents' net worth.
Yeah.
Not more than they made,
Right.
more than their net worth.
Yeah.
And so they did the only thing they could do. They said no.
Oh.
Like, they couldn't possibly pay for it.
Yeah.
Like, it's absurd. It was absurd. And I said, well, I got a bike, and I got a little paper route, and I know where the library is. So I'm going to apply, right? I can go to
What
the-
were you thinking when you said that?
exactly what I meant. Like, I'm going to apply, And
make enough money on the paper?
yeah, I make a little money on the paper, and I can go to the post office and buy some stamps. I can go to the library and get a typewriter and fill out the forms and mail them in and see what happens.
I thought you were going to do fundraising.
No. I couldn't fundraise that much money. And I didn't really understand the order of magnitude of the price. I didn't understand that.
Yeah.
I just knew that I wanted to go to a better school, and so I ought to try. And I essentially, just kind of talked my way in. The application was fine, and when I took a tour, I charmed. I just convinced.
And you were with your parents when you took
I was with my parents.
Yeah.
And several schools, including Kent, said you're welcome to come. You gotta wear the school uniform like everybody else, and we don't buy that for you, but we're not going to charge you tuition.
Okay.
And so I went to Kent, tuition free.
Starting in what grade?
Starting in 9th grade.
Yeah.
And it wasn't like the place. The community I grew up in, right? Like, to a first order approximation, it's not quite fair, but it sure feels this way. 45% of the kids I went to school with were Italian.
Yeah.
45%,
Really that much?
45% were Irish.
Yeah.
5% were Jewish, and 5% were everything else. Right? Like, I literally thought everybody in the world was Irish or Italian.
Yeah.
And there's a couple of Jews.
Yeah.
They're fine. Yeah, they're Jewish. We don't really understand why they go to Saturday instead of Sunday, but it's fine.
Yeah.
And then I showed at Kent.
Yeah.
And it's a different place.
Yeah.
Right?
And you were living there.
And I was boarding there.
Yeah.
And it's a wonderful place. And the kids are coming from really New England, the Northeast, the country, all over the world. But the kinds of money that I didn't really understand existed.
Yeah.
Just didn't really, like, it was just so far out of my world experience.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize this until years after I graduated Kent. Look, you put a bunch of like 13 and 14-year-old boys in a dormitory together, what are they going to do? Make fun of each other.
Yeah,
And that's what we do. And it wasn't in a hurtful way. It was a, boys goofing off way.
Right.
And we broke each other's balls over everything.
Yeah.
Anything and everything. It was all fair game. But not once in 4 years did a single person ever make fun of me for being poor. Not once.
Okay. But they knew that about you?
Of course, they sized me up day one. Are you kidding?
Yeah. No,
I got sneakers with 4 stripes, right? Because we couldn't afford Adidas. We went to TJ Maxx and got the knockoffs, right? And these kids are coming in not with Adidas, but with like Ralph Lauren sneakers or whatever. I don't know. They sized me up. I couldn't size them up because I didn't even know the significance of the logo on their shirt or whatever.
Right.
What I knew is that when I opened up my sport coat, because at Kent at the time you wore a coat and tie to class, I had some other kids' initials on the inside because my mom would get the blazers like at tag sales. Right, for like a couple of bucks.
And somebody might have.
Well, and for me that was totally fine.
Yeah.
Right. It was normal for me. I didn't think anything of it. I knew that not everybody did that, but what you grow up with is so normal.
So somebody would put their own initials in their jacket.
Sure.
Yeah.
And I would get somebody's hand-me-down kind of thing. But I was at this school where, even though clearly in some ways I was really different than other kids,
it
was fine.
Okay.
And
you were accepted.
I was accepted, and importantly for me, because it's an independent school, they can just kind of make up the rules as they go.
Oh, really?
And I was a kid for whom making up the rules sometimes made sense.
You mean the school did, or the kids?
Yeah, you just make up the rules.
I mean, not just the kids, but the school was very liberal.
So I show up and they're like, "Oh, you're ready to take Algebra 2 as a freshman? You're going to be the only freshman in Algebra 2, but you should be in the honors class.
Ooh.
Go for it, right?"
Ooh.
And by the time I was a senior, I had already taken calculus.
Yeah.
So in each of the 3 trimesters, one of the math teachers just like invented a class for me to take, just for me.
Because you were the only,
I wanted to take math all 4 years, and I run out of courses. And so, the school, it's the kind of place where they just take that in stride, and they appreciate it for what it is, and they're not restricted by rules or ratios. They
adapt.
What we think makes sense.
Yeah.
And I loved my time at Kent School. I'm very, very grateful for it. look, I'm wearing my class ring right now.
Take a shot of
That's
that.
that's the Kent School class ring. Now here's what's wild. My son is just finishing up 8th grade.
Oh, at Kent School?
Well, no, he's at Brookline. He's at Pierce School. He's in Brookline. He's a very good basketball player, and he's more talented academically than I was.
Really?
More well-rounded.
Oh, not just math.
Yeah, like, we both got great scores on the math, but he also aces the verbal, which I never did.
Yeah.
And he's ready to take. He knows geometry. He's finishing 8th grade, so similar to me. He's far superior to me athletically.
In what sports?
Basketball is his favorite sport.
Yeah,
but he's 14. He's 5'11", 155 pounds, pure muscle.
Yeah. Ooh.
I entered Kent School. I was 100 pounds.
And how tall?
5 foot nothing, whatever, 5'2", I don't know. Little kid. He's huge.
Yeah.
And so he's going to Kent School.
Oh, yes. Okay.
Yes.
And he wants to go.
And
Yeah.
And he's going to play basketball. He's going to row.
Wow.
He's going to do very well academically, and he's also going to really develop, I hope, if it's anything like me, both a clear sense of controlling your own path.
Destiny. Yeah. Yeah.
Nobody wakes you up in the morning to get to class. A lot of people learn this from the first day in college. Like, oh my God, I got to do this on my own.
Yeah.
Well, he's got to do it 4 years earlier.
There's no bell that sounds.
No,
you gotta just do it.
There's plenty of ways you can screw up if you want to.
Yeah.
And I think also develop more leadership skills because there's always opportunities for leadership.
Yeah, but you must have had leadership skills the way you've turned out.
I think that a little bit, and different than my son. Some of that came from baseball. I was a coach's kid, and so I played second base and then I played catcher, and I was sort of directing the field, right?
Yeah.
But I wasn't the cool kid that everybody looked up to.
You mean on the team? You mean?
Yeah, no, I wasn't the guy who was a leader because he had a ton of charisma and he batted .400.
Oh, yeah.
I was the guy who was the leader because I'm the guy who understood what the play is in this circumstance, make sure everybody's going to do it.
Yeah. But you could be a leader in other ways besides sports. Besides sports, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
And that's my point. Is at a prep school where 168 hours a week, you're still there.
Yeah.
There's opportunities for leadership in the dorm. There's opportunities for leadership in the cafeteria. There's always an opportunity to kind of either lead by example or encourage or otherwise help people do something that's better for the community.
Yeah. They did stuff like volunteer stuff in the community?
A little bit.
Yeah.
Not a lot, actually. Yeah. I mean, the school is more populous than the town is. So we would overwhelm the town if we all went in at the same time. But it was a great place for me, and it really allowed me to pursue the things in high school that I was interested in.
Yeah.
And kind of gave me a bigger springboard toward college.
Well, and also some international experience. You said there were kids.
Sure. I mean, that's absolutely right. And before Kent, I knew one family that was a family of immigrants from, I don't know, like
maybe China,
Macedonia or something.
Oh wow,
over there.
Yeah.
Not real well.
Yeah.
And there isn't a lot of that in the town I grew up in.
Yeah.
In contrast, Brookline, where my children grow up in,
it's incredible.
Incredibly diverse in so many different kinds of ways.
I know.
So
and Kent School was or not back then?
So that's a good question. So certainly, white Protestant would be still the clear majority.
Right.
But the tail is much fatter, which is to say, not one or two, but dozens of kids from China or Korea or Japan or India.
Yeah.
That's life.
Yeah.
So it was great. It was great, and I went off to college and pursued a career.
You went to BU?
I eventually went to BU.
Because I went to BU. Yeah.
I earned my PhD at BU.
That's right.
Which is how I ended up moving to Brookline.
Oh yeah. What was it like working at Lincoln Labs? Because I have quite a few clients who worked at Lincoln Labs.
When I was at BU, I enrolled a year.
Yeah.
Really, a year after 9/11.
Oh, wow.
And so
You mean at BU?
at BU.
Wow.
And so we're sort of ramping up.
Yeah.
Right. George W. Bush is president
Right.
for almost the entire time I was at BU. And we're ramping up.
Yeah. Defense stuff.
Defense.
Yeah.
And the kind of math that I was studying
Yeah.
has academic, for the sake of it, pursuits. It has real applications in industry.
Yeah.
But in fact, it was invented. The kind of math that I studied was invented
For?
in World War II so that American ships could avoid German submarines.
Tell me, I wonder if you could tell me that I would understand.
So
There's a lot of nuance for that.
yeah. So the idea is, how do you choose a path
Yeah.
that gets you where you want to go, that avoids
Yeah.
certain problem, right? And we know there might be a U-boat over here, or
Charges. What do you call that? Underground. Not
the
what
depth
is-
charges.
Depth
right?
charges.
And I'm not a World War II expert. I'm not
Yeah.
a military expert in any way,
Yeah.
shape, or form.
Yeah.
But that's where the math comes from, and so the math that I studied turns out is still useful for military engagement.
Okay.
And because I was an American citizen,
Yeah.
graduate student in mathematics,
Oh.
there's essentially an unlimited amount of money to support PhD students in mathematics who are American citizens
Yeah.
from the Department of Defense.
Oh yeah. Yeah. That makes sense.
And somebody's got to pay for this, and it wasn't going to be me. And so
I'll pay for the school.
pay for the school.
Yeah. Yeah.
Pay for the research. Pay
Yeah.
for the whole thing. And so a professor of mine had a research grant from the Department of Defense, and all of the work we were doing was published in journals.
Yeah.
No top secret
Oh,
math stuff.
right.
It's all available for the world to use however the world sees fit. But the fact of the matter is that DARPA, the Department of Defense, other United States military interests really drive a lot of
research.
science, technology, and engineering research in the
Research,
United
yeah.
States.
Yeah.
So the most obvious, the internet. Look,
Yeah.
the internet was created by the United States military.
Oh, it wasn't military.
Absolutely.
Okay. I knew it was
Absolutely.
academic.
It came out of military research.
Yeah.
Very useful for humanity. Very important for humanity. And so I effectively became part-time at BU for a couple of years, and part-time at Lincoln Laboratory, which is
I know where that
over
is.
near Hanscom Air Force Base.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, it's not part of. Is it part of Hanscom?
It's technically not. It's
Yeah.
adjacent to Hanscom. It's
Yeah.
run by MIT.
Yeah, that's right.
And it is a distinction with a difference. Lincoln Laboratory does not work on weapons. They do not work on offensive research. They
Okay.
work on defensive research.
Okay.
Right? It's a distinction with a difference.
Yeah.
On the other hand, look, if I know, no matter how much you try, you're not going to be able to punch me in the face, I might be more inclined to pick a fight.
Oh, okay.
So, it's not a get out of jail free card for your conscience, I don't think.
But when you were working there, Vietnam War was already over, I think.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, quite a ways.
Yeah, by 30 or 40 years.
Yeah. I just want to make sure.
Yeah. And the work I was working on over there is where I found my research problem that I solved to earn my PhD.
Oh.
And the problem is one that sort of becomes a math problem very easily and very cleanly, and becomes, if you're a math person, just is a very interesting math problem. And importantly, no part of my research was classified.
Okay.
Which is important for two reasons. Number one, it means that it's much easier to work on it, to talk with colleagues, talk with other students, talk with professors, because you share it with anybody.
Yeah.
It's not a secret.
Yeah.
And number two, the U.S. military is paying the bills, but they're not buying a secret that they're going to use.
So they're not putting pressure on you.
Yeah.
They're not telling you what to study or research.
Well, I mean, the grant, you have to research this area.
Yeah.
But it meant I could study something that the whole world could find ways to use in any way that's useful to the whole world. I was just contributing to general knowledge. as opposed to working on something in secret for the United States military that they would only have access to.
Yeah.
Right?
Did that feel like a difference for you?
Absolutely.
And you felt that at the time?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's not to say that doing the latter is not worthy or valuable or important for other people. I don't mean it to dissuade or discredit, but for me, it was. Look, this is a really, I don't know, 36 people have ever read my PhD thesis in the history of humanity, right? Like, it's not a bestseller. It's not a page turner.
Have they contacted you?
You have, sure,
Oh, cool.
and asked some questions. If that's the high bar, imagine if it's classified. Then only 4 people read it, and they can't even tell you they did, right? I mean, it's nice to find out when somebody reads the thing that you spent a decade working on. It feels good.
Sure.
So that's sort of how that played out. But it was a fascinating place to work. Lincoln Laboratory at the time had about 5,000 employees.
Wow.
Might be a little bigger than that now, and this is already 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And just full of really smart people working on interesting problems. Sometimes they could tell you all about them. Sometimes they could only tell you a little bit about them.
Yeah.
And I remember, it's this building. There was a series of buildings built, I guess, in the 40s. And you would walk down a hallway, and it was just like, you walk past a door, and it's just somebody's office.
Yeah.
And then the next door has got like the chemical warnings, like 444, really dangerous chemicals, right?
Oh, right.
And then 3 doors down, it's like, warning, don't look at the laser with your other eye, right?
Wow.
Like, there's always cool stuff, all this, like, there'd be a it's more common now, you see it in people's homes, but at the time it was really unusual, right? Like a door with a touchpad to get in, where the numbers would be in different places every time. So you couldn't stand down the hallway and watch the order of the fingers and then try to mimic it to break in. Whoa. Right? There's all of these really interesting things are happening there with really advanced equipment, like really good science is being done. At the time, Lincoln Laboratory owned their own 707 plane.
Oh, okay.
So that's why they're at Hanscom, and they would, communications with airplanes, and they fly the thing around and test what happens.
And they don't have that now?
I don't think they have the 707. I don't think they were using it enough to justify its cost.
Yeah.
But they do all this really, really interesting research in physics and engineering and mathematics. So if you're interested in that kind of thing, it's an amazing place to work.
And people weren't staying at home. They weren't doing by remote or virtual.
No.
Because that's happening now.
Sure, and I don't know, Lincoln Laboratory is a complicated place. I mean, at the time, I was there until, 2006 or 2007. Yeah. At that time, you were not allowed to bring your cell phone in the building if it had a camera on it.
Oh, right.
Which is like, they can't do that anymore. They've had to figure out how to move through. But because there's classified documents, you can't do that.
Yeah.
Right? The rules around secret and top secret and the various clearances really matter.
Yeah.
And they take that stuff really seriously.
I mean, still.
Yeah. You go to an office and you tap and your buddy's coming in behind you, so you hold the door open for them. Not at Lincoln Laboratory. You close the door on them, and they have to tap themselves in. Every single person has to tap themselves in every single time, no matter what. Yeah.
All right. What's it like compared to that, working here at the State House?
Oh, it's like exactly the same thing. No.
Right.
So the State House is a really wonderful place to work.
Okay.
It's really big.
Yeah.
And in the
bigger than most state capitals?
I bet it is. I don't know that to be sure.
Yeah.
Like Lincoln Laboratory, and in some ways, I mentioned it with Kent School, you don't get to be part of every conversation.
Right. Oh, yeah.
There are things happening, and you might know they're happening, and you don't know what the details are, or you might never know what happened at all. But it happened, and it mattered, and it's going to affect you later. And so, there's 160 reps, there's 40 senators.
Yeah.
There's all of
Do they mix quite a lot, the senators and the reps?
I bet they mix more in the district than they do. Yeah. I spend more time with our Senator Cindy Cream in Brookline and Newton than I do in the building.
Yeah.
That's not to say we don't ever see each other or work together in the building, but She's working on Senate issues. I'm working on House issues.
Yeah.
She's very senior and very powerful.
Yeah, I was going to ask.
I'm not. So, we're kind of different tiers.
Yeah. I was going to ask if the different conversations have to do with tenure and stuff.
It's a little bit.
Yeah.
But she's a wonderful partner. She does really great work on behalf of Brookline. I'm very grateful to have her as partner, especially when I came in and didn't know anything. She was very, very helpful in mentoring and guiding, as much as a senator could possibly mentor a person in the House, right? There's some limits. But it's a great place to work. There's always so many things going on, and I don't want to speak. I only know the House.
Yeah.
Right? I don't know the Senate nearly as well. I know the House, and House members work as a team. Right? We understand you can't get anything done by yourself.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, you're going to need a vote. You're going to need other people to agree it's a good idea.
Sure.
And so there's an awful lot of teamwork that happens here.
Yeah.
Things take a long time because there's a lot of people involved, and there are material ways in which Brookline is different than Bourne or Billerica or Brockton.
Yeah, for sure.
And the bill's got to work in those places too, or you ain't going to get the support from those places.
Right.
And so figuring out how this way you want to change the way the state law works or the way the state budget works, how it impacts different parts of the state, different kinds of people in different ways, and making sure that you're not damaging or otherwise making it harder for some other cohort of people in doing your thing. We take that really seriously. We're very careful about that, and that's one of the reasons why legislation takes so long.
To build coalitions.
You've got to build a coalition. You've got to make sure that the impacts on different communities of people, and that's not just sort of census demographics, right? It's, well, how does this impact, union labor? How does it impact non-union labor? How does this impact people who live in the community? How does this impact the people who are traveling through the community? Right? All these different viewpoints, they matter to us. And so working through all that takes time. And still, even if it's a good idea, if you don't have the votes, it ain't going to happen. Fundamentally, right? I don't know. I mean, it was Winston Churchill who said, a democracy is the worst kind of government except for all the others. Right?
Yeah. I heard that one.
Maybe that's true.
Yeah.
And so it's always interesting. And there's tons of support amongst colleagues as individuals.
But not necessarily.
Well, sure. So when I hang out with my friend who lives near the Quabbin,
I used to go to
that area.
Well, tell them it's wrong. Tell them this, that after 9/11, I think it was. Wait a minute. No, I wasn't there that far back, was I? I'm trying to remember. But you used to be able to swim sort of illegally in the Quabbin, but then they created a whole security thing.
Sure, that's people's drinking water.
Yeah, but you were able, well, they fish, and they go out in these boats with motor, with power motors.
Not anymore, they don't. Electric only.
As of when?
I don't know.
Because I was seeing where they're still doing gas motors, but they were enforcing the swimming.
We're evolving, right?
Yeah, right.
But that's sort of the point, is that he and I, great respect for each other. We're colleagues. We care about each other. We care about each other's successes and failures. We want to support each other. But also, I want the clean water for my district, and he resents that we're using his district to do it. And I don't blame him. I get it. I get it. Nevertheless, my district needs clean water.
Well, wasn't it always set up to pump it all the way to Boston?
Sure.
Oh, okay.
Sure. But were it not for the economic engine that is Boston, we wouldn't be able to send state support to his community.
Of course. Does he understand that?
He does, but then, look, we always want what's best for our district.
Yeah.
And I don't fault him for advocating for his district.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean I'm going to necessarily vote the way he wants me to on one of his issues.
Sure.
Right? But I don't begrudge him for it.
Yeah.
I respect him for it. That's his job. At the end of the day, he gets to keep his job if the 45,000 people who live in his district think he's doing a good job, and I get to keep my job if the 45,000 people in my district think I'm doing a good job, right? And so, don't begrudge your rep because they're doing what they said they were going to do, and then they went and got elected.
Right.
If that's what they ran on and they got elected,
then
they're doing what they said they were going to do.
Yeah.
And so you might be opposed to it. You might work hard to make sure that legislation never sees the light of day as written.
Yeah.
But I think in almost all cases, we don't fault the rep. Hey, they're representing their community, and that's what their community wants.
Yeah. No, I didn't live in the Quabbin district. Actually, I was there during 9/11. I just remember. But what about, I think what's really important, not that what you're talking about, the local kind of stuff is of course important, but the state of Massachusetts really stands out in a lot of ways. And right now, what do you think are some of the most important ways that we're standing out?
Well, some of the most important ways we're standing out are now becoming real risks.
Yeah, that's
so
what I mean.
We stand out in meds and eds.
Yeah.
Great hospitals, great universities.
Yeah.
World class.
Yeah.
Really world class. We're all like this weird sort of forced humility or jealousness around Harvard University.
Yeah.
Like it evokes a lot of emotions in a lot of people.
Yes.
I'm not affiliated in any way with Harvard. I didn't apply to go to school there. I guess I've walked through campus once or twice, but I don't really know much.
Wait a minute, by the way, Johan's son got admitted to Harvard, but chose not to go. Chose University of Florida in Gainesville.
Love it.
I do too. Yeah.
More fun down there, I'll bet.
Oh yeah, right. Right.
But there's no question that the existence of Harvard and the success of Harvard has helped the state. Right. Our standard of living is higher. Our level of education is higher. And it's, I think that is, I don't want to say it's in our DNA, because I don't want to take it for granted, but Massachusetts values education. We tend to be more educated, and we tend to insist on more education for the kids coming next.
Right.
I think that's really important. But meds and eds. Right? How many people work in hospitals or other medical centers, work in universities or other education?
Right. Or biopharm.
Well, that's part of meds, right? It's sort of adjacent. And now we have President Trump.
Oh yeah.
So going out of his way to cut funding in the middle of a grant, right? This sort of, take a chainsaw to it rather than a scalpel approach. And I believe it's bad for America and our position of leadership, but it's particularly bad for Massachusetts. People forget, many, I don't know most, possibly most, I just don't know well enough, of the most important scientists in the 1940s were immigrants.
German Jewish ones, for example.
Not exclusively, but certainly, right? And
that's what I was about to ask you, was about immigration. I was about
such an important leader in science as a direct result of war and immigration. Right? And we've held that leadership position in academia, particularly in science, from the 40s
all the way.
From the 1940s to the 2020s. And the question is, what happens now? If you're a PhD researcher and a school in Europe or in Asia is offering to fund the research the U.S. just stopped funding, are you going to stop working on your life's work? Or are you going to move? Some are going to choose A, some are going to choose B. It's not, I don't think it's good for the future of the United States. It's certainly not good for our state here in Massachusetts.
Well, what about the fact, related to that, that our governor and so forth are really standing up, and the mayor, about sanctuary or against the immigration attack, the attack on immigrants. What do you feel about that? And what do you feel about Massachusetts being like in the forefront?
So I don't know if we are in the forefront. Certainly this week, Los Angeles isn't.
No, I know. I mean,
but it moves around. And I think the word sanctuary has become a word with more power or value than it deserves.
Okay.
And that's both because the left and the right have weaponized the word to mean something.
Something different?
It means something different to every single person you talk to.
Yeah.
Right? It's one of those words that gets to mean whatever you want it to mean, which makes it hard for anyone to use the word well, because the listeners all hear something different. So I don't want to sort of get caught up on the word.
Okay.
The question is, what do we do about the fact that our United States Congress, sometimes led by Democrats, sometimes led by Republicans, sometimes under a Democratic president, sometimes under a Republican president, have failed on immigration going back to Ronald Reagan, at least.
You mean in creating legislation that would...
Figuring out how to not have millions of undocumented immigrants in America.
Yeah.
Whether that means you want to put a gun turret every 50 feet on the Mexican border, or whether that means you want to actually make it more reasonable for people who want to become American citizens to become American citizens, right? I'm not arguing what the answer is. I'm not a congressman. It's not my job to figure it out. But it's clear that this is a problem at least 40 years in the making.
Yes.
And I find that really frustrating. I find it really frustrating.
And in that time, in the meantime, people are suffering.
Yeah.
I mean, immigrants, or people who want to immigrate, are suffering. And we've got, this is a state that's become very diverse, right? We have a lot of immigration here. And if the mood in the country takes a turn like Trump is trying to do, it's bad for our state.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that...
and you're like third generation, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things, when people say, my grandparents came the right way, they came legally, I don't believe that. People found all kinds of workarounds. At Ellis Island, there was a lot of workarounds, right?
So a couple of things. First of all, history is rewritten by the victors.
Yeah.
And so if your families are still here, right, does the story about how you scammed somebody survive? No, that goes away.
Yeah, right.
We don't speak ill of the dying or the dead, which is a good habit.
Yeah.
But what it means is the stories about the shenanigans somehow don't survive.
Exactly.
Right? And we fill in the history. That's not related to immigration. That's just related to humanity. Right?
Human nature.
And I think we should sort of allow for that.
Yeah.
The other part of it is, if we had the same immigration laws we had in 1910, there'd be a lot of people today who would be citizens who are not citizens.
Oh,
it was easier to move to America and become a citizen than it is now. We made it really hard, and then we say, well, why aren't you following the rules? Because you made them really hard.
Yeah.
A friend of mine just became a U.S. citizen.
From where?
From the Philippines.
Okay.
Here's the thing. She was a year behind me at Kent School.
Oh, wow. Oh, Kent School was co-ed?
Yeah.
When you talked about the guys in the cabin, it sounded like it was an all-boys school.
It's not. It's co-ed.
Okay.
So my friend came to Kent School a year after I did. She's a year behind me. Now she was Filipino citizen.
Yeah.
Grew up in Saudi Arabia.
Yeah.
And attended an international elementary school.
Yeah.
So she
learned English.
Taught by American teachers as opposed to European teachers. So she arrived at Kent School speaking fluent American English. I had no idea she was not a U.S. citizen. I just she's got brown skin.
Right.
She's got Asian eyes. She speaks English like an American. She's an American.
Right.
Like, why would I think anything differently?
Right.
But that's what everybody would have assumed anyway. And also, I was a dumb 14-year-old kid who hadn't seen anything in the world, right?
Yeah.
And I only learned that she was not a U.S. citizen very recently.
Really?
I had no idea.
And you knew her in high school?
Yeah. And she is a funny story, right? She is actually a teacher at Milton Academy.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay. Which is similar. I'm just telling the audience here.
It's similar in many ways to Kent School.
Yeah.
And she decided to stay in America after college because her younger sister was in America and she wanted to kind of stick around. She was able to do so, of all reasons, because she had expertise in Middle English, like Chaucer.
Oh, really?
Like that really hard to understand. High school kids read it and they're like, I don't even know what this word means in English. That stuff.
Well, you read the Cliff Notes.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Wanda Tapriu with the Shota Soto, right? That kind of English. She happens to be good at that for reasons I don't understand. And also for reasons I don't understand. That was, useful to her in getting a green card. Don't ask me to explain it. These are the facts for reasons I do not know.
Yeah.
And so she stayed in America, and then she fell in love with an American, got married, had kids.
Yeah.
So her children are American citizens.
Yeah.
When she was pregnant with her oldest child, she decided she wanted to be an American.
Yeah.
Not so her children could be American. They were going to be American.
So she hadn't yet become.
She was not, yeah. But because, like, for whatever reason, she said, this is where I want my home to be for the rest of my life. These are where my loyalties lie. I'm an American in my soul. I want to become an American citizen. That was 16 years ago or something, 12 years ago. She became an American citizen 2 weeks ago.
Really?
That's how long it takes.
Oh, shit. Is
That's
she a
how long it takes.
constituent of yours?
No.
She doesn't live in Brookline.
No. I mean, she flew in English speaking, employed in a prep school as an educator, married to an American kids. Her mother-in-law is a former state rep in Brookline before Frank Smizek was running the city for 2 years.
Oh, you mean her husband's mother? Yeah.
And yet it still took over a decade.
Did she explain how? Or you kind of know the reasons for that? You sort of know
the
that?
The process is designed to take forever. And it's foolish.
Of course.
It's foolish.
Well, when we say that we really support small business, look at all the obstacles we put in the way of that. I mean, there's obstacles that are ridiculous on every level. Do you know what I'm saying?
With respect to employment?
Yeah,
Sure.
with respect to, but also even because we're a federal country, like the way you have to get another license. Like I'm a psychotherapist now. If I want to practice in New York or something, I have to pass, or if you were a lawyer, everything's divided instead of nationalized.
So it cuts both ways. So it's true that feels burdensome.
Yeah.
It's also true that, with all due respect to the great state of Arkansas, I don't trust a psychotherapist who passes the Arkansas licensing board.
No, but what if they just
practice on people in Massachusetts?
No, but just have a national thing instead, right?
Yeah, well, look who's in Congress now. Do you trust their standards?
No. The thing
so?
It could be, no, here's the thing. I'm glad you brought that up. Do you know that the big, huge rally that's happening this Saturday, June 14th?
Is there a...
all over the country.
Like the 50, 51, whatever.
Yeah, similar to that.
Numbers are.
Yeah. Maybe bigger, called Indivisible.
Yeah.
And I just found out this morning they're not doing D.C. They're doing everywhere, but essentially not D.C. And I guess it's because the fear of violence, because Trump is doing the military parade.
He's got this military parade, yeah.
Yeah. And so what I thought about that this morning, right away, it made me depressed, and it made me think about our system, about the federal system, that like MAGA has become a national movement, and we don't have that on our side. I mean, if we did, the Democratic Party as a party would be out there in force supporting the immigrants getting screwed over in LA, or things like that. You know, like I get in the mail every day solicitation from every new person running for Congress in every single state. And everyone says it's the most important thing. But if we just had a national party, we wouldn't have to do it that way. Like they do in every other, Western country.
I think that there are some things that are important differences that we sort of gloss over when we talk about the way the Europeans do it.
Yeah.
In 2024, people who live in Brookline voted in 4 different elections. There was a presidential primary.
Yeah.
There was a municipal election in May.
Yeah.
There was an election, the primary in September, and the general election in November.
Yeah.
Between those 4 elections,
what was the 4th one?
The general election. So the primary in September, right?
The municipal.
And then the November general election.
Yeah.
Between those 4 elections, the people in Brookline had more votes to cast than a person who lives in England can cast in their entire life.
Okay. Yeah.
In England, every time there's an election,
you
get 3 votes. you vote for your local parish, your community,
Yeah.
your region, and your federal political party of choice. That's it.
Yeah.
You don't vote for any people. You vote for you have 3 different layers of political party. That's roughly every 5 years.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, and they do represent a location.
Yes.
And some
but you
places
don't vote for the representative. You represent for the political party who then fills in based on how many seats they get.
Right. And that's true in Israel, for example. I lived in Israel.
That's true in the Knesset.
Yeah.
That's true in most nations have parliamentary systems. And that's how they work. It's not how the United States works.
No.
We don't vote for political parties. We vote for individuals. You know, and I think I would be really interested to learn all the reasons why that's better or worse. I've never taken a political science course in my life.
Whoa.
I should start, right? I should take a lot of courses I've never taken.
Right.
So regardless of whether or not it's better or worse, that's how it is, and it's not going to change anytime soon.
For sure.
Right?
But you can see some disadvantages.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. And so like the reality is, people say this in America all the time. Oh, the Democratic Party put them up. That's not how it works. The Democratic Party does not pick candidates to run. That is just not how it works.
Right.
It's not how it works. Now, there may be people who are Democrats who sort of say, hey, we should find a candidate. We should get Joe to run or get Susan to run. She's going to be great.
Yeah.
And recruit the person. But that's not the party. The party does not recruit candidates in almost any case.
Yeah.
Every once in a while, if there's the death of a candidate right before an election, the political party can choose the replacement.
Well, that's what happened with Kamala, I guess, in a way.
In a way.
Yeah.
But it's very rare. And you see how it worked out. A bunch of people were really frustrated about that.
I know.
Right? And I don't know how much of it was they were looking for an excuse to do what they were going to do anyway, and how much of it was, no, really, that's the thing that rubbed them the wrong way, and they decided they would vote for somebody else for president because they didn't like this sort of obscure, arcane process.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Right. Good point.
But so for us, like we vote for people, and the party is stuck with the people who are elected, whether or not the party even likes them. Right?
Well, wait a minute. Think about this, though. What I was thinking about, could you imagine, first of all, Washington, D.C. is not represented. It's not a state.
Correct.
And they always had, and there's been movement to try to do that for like years and years. I was born in D.C., but grew up originally in Maryland. But I feel like that's crazy. But in terms of not having this demo in D.C., which I was shocked at, I mean, when Trump first got elected on the first term, there were 500,000 people. I went down for that. And could you imagine Berlin when the wall fell? Well, of course it was walled off. But could you imagine Berlin not being the center of the movement that, let's say, overthrew communism? Could you imagine not doing actions in Berlin or any other capital of any other country?
You know, I think that I could wax poetic one way or the other on this.
Let me hear. I like poetry.
The thing about D.C. is there's 2 Washington D.C.s, and we could say literally the district, we could say a circle bigger than that.
Yeah.
There's a small group of people who live there, whose roots are there.
Yes.
Whose parents grew up there.
Right, that's right.
Who went to school there, who work there. And they watch CNN or C-SPAN, and they see the same CNN or C-SPAN I see here, and they know exactly as much about what's going on in the federal government. They just happen to be 3 miles away from it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And then there's all of the people who went to college somewhere else, who grew up somewhere else, and who live in Maryland or Northern Virginia or D.C. Because their work is in or adjacent to the federal government.
That's right.
And they're Americans.
Right.
They're entitled to their point of view.
Yeah.
They're residents. Their driver's license says Virginia. They're real Virginians, regardless of whatever some congressperson says.
Yeah.
Their license plate says Maryland. Their license says Washington, D.C. I don't in any way mean to discount their residency, citizenship, and right to speak up as a person who lives there.
Yeah.
On the other hand,
well, wait a minute,
it sure doesn't feel as grassroots as when the good folks in Iowa, who are all from Iowa, say this matters to us as Iowans.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel the same.
No, but the reason they haven't approved statehood is that they know it would vote Democratic. It's another, and I mean, there was also the race card, but it's also about the Democratic.
I think it's complicated.
Yeah.
I think it's really complicated because the federal government has to exist in this jurisdiction, right? And as it is, by law, Washington, D.C. City Council laws can get vetoed by the US
government.
Congress.
Yeah, that's right.
Because the U.S. Congress, frankly, has to operate and can't be subject to
I see.
the whims. The 330 million Americans in our government can't be subject to the whims of the 700,000 people who happen to live in D.C. That's not a good outcome either, right? It's
You mean if laws there would restrict certain aspects of Congress? Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
And now if D.C.'s a state, how does that change? I'm not a government or constitutional scholar. I don't know, but it's a thing I would be worried about. I would be perfectly happy if, in addition to the electoral votes, Washington, D.C. had members of Congress who could vote. They have members of Congress,
but they don't vote.
Right?
Yeah.
I'd be perfectly happy with that. I don't have a beef with that. But they don't actually need to be a state for that. Here's another fun
that's
fact.
a good compromise.
Here's a fun thing.
Yeah.
You grew up in Washington, D.C.?
Yeah. No, I grew up in Maryland.
But if you grew up in Washington, D.C., and you graduated high school, by federal law, you can attend any state school in the country
for free
as an in-state student.
Oh, okay.
And pay in-state tuition any state in the country.
Including Massachusetts,
Including
obviously.
Massachusetts.
Yeah.
That's something you get by virtue of growing up in Washington, D.C.
That's not bad. No,
It's a
I
cute
understand.
little perk. I ain't saying that's the end all be all, but in-state tuition is half of out-of-state tuition in most places. So
right.
I mean, it's sort of a nod to this place is different. It's hard to have a public university in Washington, D.C. There's not a lot of space left, and
they do have one. Yeah.
I don't think Georgetown's going to hand over half their school, right?
Not
so that's
all,
sort of a way to navigate it, to manage it.
Yeah. Well, I'm disappointed though because I'm thinking about how this thing's going to get covered in the States and then all over the world. Because if you're not having a thing in D.C. and Trump is doing what he's doing and taking all of the media, right, it could look like there's not much of an opposition. Even though there's going to be rallies everywhere. I mean, Brookline's going to have one. Every single town is going to have, or not everyone, but there's going to be all of these things.
Yeah, sure. I'm not in the business of telling people how to protest, right?
Yeah, no, of course.
And so it's easy to romanticize and to sort of assume or expect other people will protest in ways that risks harm to them or their families, right?
Oh, right.
It's easy to just kind of like, we want them to stand up. But, they're the one who's going to get hit by the rubber bullet or worse, not you. Right?
No, I mean, but that's L.A. Well, I was in Chicago in '68.
Yeah.
We just did a podcast about that and the comparison. But when I went to the thing, I went to that April 5th thing, we were there covering it here. It was the most peaceful, civilized, friendly. There were a lot of white-haired ladies from Brookline.
Sure.
It was very, very peaceful.
Maybe Trump calls out National Guardsmen, or maybe he doesn't.
You mean in D.C.?
And maybe the tanks driving down Connecticut Avenue, the turret turns and faces the crowd, or maybe it doesn't, right? I don't know what's going to happen. It's...
Do you really think that can happen? I mean, it happened in Chicago. I was there, and they were facing. The National Guard was facing us.
I don't want to speculate about what will or won't happen, but I think it's fair for other people to say, hey, in the spectrum of all possibilities, I don't want to be there.
Yeah.
Look.
No, the organization called it off, or they changed.
Right. So the organizers thought
we don't want to.
We're gonna, we'd rather focus elsewhere.
Yeah.
This past Sunday, a couple of days ago, I went to the Run for Their Lives rally.
You did, in Newton,
Mm-hmm.
Oh, it's right on the Newton.
Every Sunday.
Yeah.
There's visible security on premise. They're
especially since
what happened in Boulder,
Yeah.
right, the firebombing in Boulder. I went precisely because it was the very week after Boulder,
Yeah.
and I thought it was important.
Yeah.
But I made the decision to not tell my wife I was going.
Really?
And here's
Okay.
why. My wife would never say to me, I don't want you to go.
Yeah.
She would never.
Yeah.
Right? If God forbid something happened to me, I didn't want my wife to feel guilty because she knew and didn't tell me not to go. So I made the decision to go without telling her.
Yeah.
Because I knew she would never say no, but I didn't want that on her conscience.
Of course.
Right?
Of course.
And that I'm thinking about that.
Yeah.
The likelihood's very, very low.
Oh,
To be really clear, I'm more likely to die in a car crash on the way.
For sure.
Right? I don't want to
Absolutely.
overstate it.
Yeah.
But human beings, even people who are scientists like me,
Yeah.
right? We are irrational in ways. And
Oh, yeah, in
we're
terms of
emotional.
probabilities.
We're emotional in ways. And so, yeah, these thoughts cross my mind. This might be...
Did you think of that day?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I appreciate you went.
And to be clear, I didn't, I wasn't walking across a minefield. Like I wasn't doing this incredibly brave thing. I don't want to oversell it in any way.
Yeah.
But that thought went through my mind, sort of suggests to me that sometimes irrational or not perfectly logical thoughts go through other people's minds too when it comes to their safety and the safety of their loved ones. And so I think, if people choose to protest a different way or to be in a different place or to do it differently, I think you just got to say that's okay.
Yeah. Yeah, so it must have been, so that's a good way. I like that response. I mean, I think it makes me feel a little bit better, So one last question. You've been really good, by the way. Your soulful quality is pretty unusual, I think.
My which quality?
You're soulful. You're, extroverted, soulful type of quality. I mean, in a place that one would think is kind of staid or something. Or not just the State House, but Massachusetts in general. It's a pretty introverted place, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And you're pretty emotional. You're out there.
Yeah.
Say,
At my own peril. At my own peril.
Yeah. But it hasn't cut into it. You haven't restrained yourself about that, I don't think. Or you haven't said, I've got to fit in with all these other people.
Well, I think that the funny thing about being a rep is you do two very different jobs in two very different places at the same time. And there's this idea, there's this concept that's often associated with African Americans called code switching.
Oh, yeah.
Where you use a different vernacular.
Yeah.
You carry yourself differently in different places because the two cultures and customs are different, and you need to be effective in both places.
In both, yeah.
Right? And so we see it most often, I think, recently, historically, with African Americans who in their own community have a particular culture, but the boss man doesn't appreciate that culture when they show up to work, and they need to be paid.
Yeah.
They need to keep their job.
Yes.
Right? They need to work within a larger society that has a different set of rules that, fair or not, are the rules.
Yeah.
Right? So my district, Brookline, has a culture, and this building has a culture, and they're not the same.
Yeah.
And I think for me to be doing a good job, I need to be effective. I need to be successful in both of those places. And that means that I do carry myself differently in the two places because they operate differently. They need to achieve different things. The cast of characters is different.
For sure.
And if I want to be effective in this building, it's important to me that my colleagues, that staff who work in this building, that I'm communicating clearly, both giving and receiving communication clearly with them in ways in which they are comfortable. And I'm behaving in ways where they feel like we're working together. And that style is different than in the district.
Yeah.
And the style of Brookline is different than the style of Brockton or Billerica or
of course.
Bourne.
Yeah.
And I don't know if other reps think about this or not. Maybe I do because I didn't grow up in Brookline.
Yeah, exactly.
It's an accident that I live in Brookline.
Yeah, and you grew up in Connecticut.
I wonder, like, if I had moved to Duxbury, could I have been the state rep? The answer is no.
Right,
Not a chance.
I know.
Right? And I think, like, maybe on the best of days, there's like 4 districts out of the 160 that theoretically I could have moved to 25 years ago and somehow gotten myself elected.
Yeah.
Maybe there's 4.
Well, Cambridge maybe.
Parts of Cambridge, but not other parts. Right? I mean, it's complicated.
Yes.
And I think that's like one of the magical things about, I think, particularly the House.
Yeah.
Is the reps are, in a sense, very positive way, they're like caricatures of their district.
That's a good way of putting it. Do you use code switching as a term for you guys? I mean, or just for black?
I don't think so. I think it's, and it's not just 2 places, right?
Yeah.
When I'm with,
Oh yeah, it would be a lot.
when I'm with a group of advocates,
Oh. You mean lobbyists?
no, I mean advocates. I mean people, who really care about a particular issue, and that's the thing that motivates them to argue for change.
Yeah.
It's a different vibe than if I'm sitting down with 3 people who are all struggling with the same state agency that can't seem to process their paperwork.
Oh yeah.
Right? It's different.
Yes.
And we all do this. We all, look, your behavior at a wedding is different than your behavior at a funeral.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And you might have to go to both on the same day, and you're going to have to figure it out.
Yeah.
Right? So we all do this. I don't think it's like this big eureka moment. I'm not providing this giant, this is not going to be spun off into a TED Talk, right? Like, we all know, a lot of people, they go to work at one place.
Yeah. Oh.
Right? But I go to work at 2 places. Right? Because when I'm in Brookline, I'm working.
That's right.
I'm meeting with constituents or with town staff or with people who care about an issue, a neighborhood, or with nonprofits. Right? I'm working. And so I am who I am.
Yeah.
And as I've gotten older, I've sort of learned to accept that a little bit more. There are things about my personality which are sometimes useful and oftentimes frustratingly difficult or create more problems. I create more problems for myself some of the times with ways that I am. And other times those same ways open up doors. Right?
Yeah.
And
but that could be true.
That's true for all of us,
for all of us,
right?
Yeah.
And as I've gotten a little older, perhaps just because I have children, I've sort of watched their personalities develop and where their personality helped them or where it hindered them. I am who I am, and I can't change that. But what I can do is try to put the best parts of myself out front and try to choose the right way to interact with people at that moment. And that changes depending on the circumstance. Sure. And I've got a lot of work to do there. I think we all do.
Yeah. You mean understanding other people.
And presenting the parts of ourselves that contribute to a positive outcome in that circumstance.
Yeah.
And holding back the instinct to get the last word in, or to say something snarky, or to whatever that thing is in you that in this particular moment is not the helpful thing.
Yeah.
I'm a guy who likes to ask questions. There are some circumstances where that's not helpful, and I have to learn to just sit on my hands and not ask the question I really want to ask, because this is not the right time and place for that.
Yeah.
For whatever reason. So it's not always a trait that is sort of more objectively a bad habit.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's the way you're wired. I'm wired to try to ask an interesting, challenging, difficult question of the speaker.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Which served me really well in academia.
Oh yeah.
But here, it's not always helpful to ask that hard question in public.
Well, how do you hold yourself back?
It's
hard, right?
It's hard, it's a thing that I'm working on.
Yeah.
There are lots of things I'm working on to be better at my job.
Yeah.
To be better at interacting with people in ways that are as productive as possible, regardless of the circumstance.
Well, I was just thinking, because you were born in a different state, so was I. It was hard when I was 14, almost 15, to end up in Swampscott of all places. Very, very strange. But I got out of there pretty quick. But Barney Frank who also represented Brookline and Newton and so forth, and was, I think, one of the best congressmen in Massachusetts, and was snarky. He was terrible with the media, but they loved him. But he moved here from New Jersey, had a very different personality, but he was very popular, and he was brilliant.
Well, that's just it. Congressman Frank had the advantage of being brilliant. Since I don't have that advantage,
come on.
I can't get away with being as I mean, even when he was snarky, he was hysterical.
That's right.
Right?
That's right. Yeah.
Were it so, but it ain't. You know. I had a conversation with him a couple weeks ago.
Oh, did you? Yeah.
And he's still Barney Frank.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, he just is.
I actually interviewed him too, but it was about 2 years ago or something.
Yeah.
He lives up in Maine.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And he's wonderful.
I know. Excellent.
Yeah, I don't have the brilliance he has, so I gotta do
humor,
it. I gotta try to do it my way. Unfortunately, like I'm not as quick as he is. Yeah. I'm not as razor sharp as he is.
And the humor.
Yeah. Well, that comes through in his humor.
Yeah. Yeah. That Jewish ironic humor. Right. Yeah.
But I certainly appreciate it.
Jesus. Oh man, this has been very, very good.
Good.
I hope you've enjoyed it.
I love it. I've had a great time. Yeah.
Oh, good, man.
Thanks for coming in.
Yeah, thank you. I hope I see you again.
I'm sure we will.
Definitely.
I'm sure we will.
Definitely.